Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shane Brogan. I am the Co-operative Party's National Membership Manager. So I'm going to be talking us through today's, the final in our series of summer school sessions. Today's topic is going to be a bit around the relationship between the Co-op Party and the Labour Party and some of the ways that we work together, both at particularly at a local level, and some of the ways that you can get involved in supporting some of that. Before I do it, some of the housekeeping, I suppose. This session is being recorded, so it will be uploaded to our website after today for any other members who haven't been able to join us. If you don't want to have your picture featured in that, you can turn off your camera now, and that will make sure that you're not shown in that. The second bit is in terms of muting your microphone. That's okay. You should hopefully be muted when you joined, but if you have accidentally turned on your microphone, it'd be great if you could just disable it, just to make sure that we can all stay on the same track. And the last bit is that at the end of I'll do a quick talk through some of the topics and some of the areas that we can work together on, and then it'd be great to hear some of your questions. And there's two ways you can do that. The first way, and probably the easiest way, is if you see at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat button, and that'll bring up a chat box, and you can type your questions in there as we go along. If you're not able to see that for any reason, or it's not working, feel free to email it through to events@party.coop. So you should have had the registration email come through from that. And those are the two ways that we'll take questions today. As with all these, if you have any specific questions to your local area, we won't be able to talk about those on the screen, and we'll pick up those up after the meeting, so after this call. So if it's general meetings about getting involved or a bit of kind of general experience, and that's perfectly fine, and it'd be great to hear those questions. But if it's any questions about kind of issues around delegates being elected and all that kind of stuff, it's best to take those offline, just so we can make sure there's any personal information involved, and those can be done in a safe way. But that's all the housekeeping out of the way, and we can make a start. For those of you who've joined a little late, my name is again Shane Brogan. I'm the party's National Membership Manager. Over the last few weeks, these sessions have sort of given you a bit of an introduction to the Co-op Party as recently new members, and to tell you a little bit more about our work, and particularly also how you get involved. One of the key things about the Co-op Party is that we are obviously both a political party and a cooperative, and the key of that is member involvement and engagement. We have a small staff team, but we're only able to achieve what we can do is thanks to the time, energy and effort of ordinary people like you giving up your time to volunteer within our branches, to take part in our campaigns, and as we talked about today, to be a CLP delegate or to be active within your local Labour Party. If you have missed any of the sessions that we've already done, they are all on our website, and you can also check them on our YouTube channel as well. So what we'll try to do is run a quick 3 parts today. We'll do a quick run through of sort of the basics of the relationship between the Labour Party and the Co-operative Party. The second bit will then have a bit more detailed look at some of the more technical bits of how that operates at a local level, and that'll be a little bit of alphabet soup as we go through CLPs, constituency, Labour parties and things like that. And the final part will be, I think perhaps the most important part, which is the kind of things that you can do within those bodies in terms of taking forward our campaigns, our policies and ideas to your local Labour movement. As you probably well known by now, and we probably stressed it quite a lot over the last few weeks, is that the Co-op Party has been around quite a while. So you may be a recent member and you may only recently have heard about us, but the Co-op Party has existed since 1917. And for the first 10 years that we existed, we stood candidates in our own right, and we had MPs in Parliament, councillors in local government across the country. The Co-op Party was established by the UK's co-op societies. And it's the exact same way that the Labour Party was founded by trade unions, and today the trade unions are still part of the Labour affiliate to the Labour Party and part of the Labour family. The UK's co-op societies are still affiliated to the Co-op Party and are part of our wider movement. But although these are two separate movements, going right back to the 1800s, the founders of the Labour movement are the founders of the Co-op movement, and vice versa, both firmly rooted in working class communities, empowering people to take control and have a say, in the case of the trade unions, have a say in their workplace, and in the case of the Co-op movement, have a say as consumers in services that they buy and the goods that they purchase. That's where the Co-op Party came from. So we've always been quite strong and worked closely together. But since 1927, we've had a special agreement with the Labour Party, which is sometimes called the Cheltenham Agreement. from where it was signed. And that recognises that the Co-op Party, the relationship between the Co-op Party and the Labour Party is very unique. We are sister parties. The only other sister party that Labour has in the UK is the Social Democratic and Labour Party in Northern Ireland. But in terms of our relationship, it's based around the principle that we are both independent, but we recognise we're part of the same social movement, and that in a system that has things like first past the post, the only way that the people on the broad left of politics can get elected is to work together and to form electoral alliances. And that's where the Labour and Co-operative joint candidates come from that agreement in 1927. So unlike some of the socialist societies like the Fabian Society or the trade unions, the Co-op Party doesn't affiliate on a national level to the Labour Party. Instead, all our relationships are at a local level, and we act as that intersection between the local co-op movement and the local labour and trade union movement. And that agreement, which was signed more than 90 years ago, still has been updated and still governs the basis of that relationship. As I said, it commits us to working together at a local level, and that means particularly important when it comes to elections, and we have joint Labour and Co-operative candidates standing on a joint Labour and Co-operative manifesto, and if elected, they sit in a joint Labour and Co-operative group on the council, for example. It also means that the Co-op Party affiliates at the local level to every constituency Labour Party. So that's to try and not use too many abbreviations, but today when we talk about CLPs, we're talking about constituency Labour Parties, which is the core unit of the Labour Party based around a parliamentary constituency. So if you live in England and Wales, it's your Westminster parliamentary constituency, is your CLP. If you live in Scotland, it's the Scottish Parliament constituency boundaries are used. And if you live in Northern Ireland, there is a single constituency Labour Party for the whole of Northern Ireland for all the constituencies there. There are generally two ways that CLPs are structured, and it's quite important because when it comes to thinking about some of the ways that we can interact with them and make sure that the wider pool of Labour Party members know more about the Co-op Party, know more about our policy agenda, and that we kind of more mainstream Co-op Party ideas and cooperative principles into Labour thinking. And there's two ways that the CLPs are structured. The first is perhaps the more traditional one, which is around a delegate body. And in that case, all the local Labour Party branches and all the affiliates, the trade union branches and the social societies, they all elect delegates to what's called the General Committee, or sometimes you'll hear it called to the GC. And so whereas at your local branch, any member can come along and they can have a say and they have a vote. At the GC, the meetings might be open to all members, but only delegates have a vote. And that's quite important when it comes to things like the AGM, but also they normally will get priority in terms of speaking time, or if there's motions, again, it'll only be the delegates that get to vote. The Co-op Party is one of the few organisations that's affiliated to every single CLP right across the UK and all 4 nations. And that's because of that kind of strong link that we have within Labour, that we feel it's important not only to have a group of parliamentarians at Westminster, but it's also important to have those strong links locally as well. And when your CLP has a delegate structure, there'll normally be between 1 and 5 delegates elected by your local Co-op Party who will attend those delegates. To be a delegate, you should be a member of the Co-op Party for about 9 months. Normally, it can be relaxed in certain situations, but normally the general rule is 9 months. Elections tend to happen at the branch Co-op Party AGM. But sometimes the votes can take place throughout the year, and they'll normally be on the agenda. They'll always be on the agenda before the meeting, so you'll have good notice to put yourself forward. And they're also gender balanced, so in terms of, we've got restrictions in terms and requirements in terms of making sure that there is a minimum number of members who identify as women as part of those delegations. So that's the CLP structure, and that's perhaps the more traditional route, and that's when we talk about delegates, that's what we're talking about. The second structure, which is quite a few have changed to recently, we'll just quickly touch on that, is called an all-member meeting. And it's more streamlined, but also it's slightly more complicated too. So in an all-member meeting structure, every member has a vote at their branch, but they also have every member has a vote at the CLP level as well. So there are no delegates. Everybody has an equal say. And while that makes it easier for all members to take part, it does make it more tricky to make sure that all parts of the wider movement are involved. So it means that it makes it harder to make sure that all branches are represented or that all affiliates are represented. But it does have the value of giving everybody a vote. So it works, different parts of the country works differently. In those all-member meeting structures, there isn't a delegate. Obviously, there aren't delegates, but our local branches will normally elect people. to kind of have the title of delegate. And that's really just to make sure that there's somebody in the room who feels that they are empowered to represent the Co-op Party, that they can stand up and say, to talk about our policies and our agenda, and to feel that they have the right to do so. But of course, any member of the Co-op Party can do so. So even if you're not a delegate from the CLP, from the Co-op Party to the CLP, you can, of course, just stand up at any point in a debate and raise kind of our policies and agenda. And the last section that we'll come on today is really, we'll be strongly encouraging you to do so. As well as and just to finish, I suppose, that alphabet soup, as I said, as well as your CLP meetings, the Co-op Party will not always, but quite often will have a seat on the executive committee, so along with the other officers. Again, that's an important role in making sure that in communicating between both the parties, inputting policy ideas, and discussing joint events and plans and campaigns and those kind of things. And the very last set of abbreviations is one that applies just to it doesn't apply in Northern Ireland, it's just in England, Scotland, Wales, which is at a local level. So your CLP normally will cover your parliamentary constituency. You then have a second tier, which is designed to coordinate the campaigns for local councils. And they're traditionally called local campaign forums, or LCF. And then the process of being renamed local government committees, LGC. Not too much has changed within those, but the important thing is that the Co-op Party is entitled to a seat at every one of those. And those bodies bring together representatives of all the trade union affiliates, representatives of all the branches, representatives of the candidates and the Labour councillors, and the Co-op Party as well. So it's particularly important when it comes, obviously, to and only really exists to coordinate those local government campaigns. And so we'll talk a bit as well later on about some of the things that you can do in getting involved in that. As I said, as with all of these, there are well over 600 CLPs across the country, and so different things will be different in different parts of the country, and people will have slightly different rules depending on where they live. If you have got local issues, then do feel free to get in touch. So if you for example, you're having issues with a CLP secretary recognising your delegates, or you're not really too sure about whether you should have delegates, then do get in touch. As I said, the best thing to do is not put in the chat today, but to drop a quick email to membership@party.coop, and we'll help you resolve some of those issues if you have them. But the last bit, I suppose, today is to quickly touch on is some of the things that you can do to promote the Co-op Party to a wider Labour Party membership. So the Co-op Party now has over 12,000 members. We've got over 55,000 supporters, and also we're kind of the political wing of a movement that has millions of members in every corner of the country. But the Labour Party membership is obviously bigger than our Co-op Party membership, and we see that as a perfect opportunity to educate those hundreds of thousands of Labour Party members about what we stand for, what we want to do, to educate them on the fact that Co-op Party ideals and values are in many cases quite are at the heart of Labour and traditional Labour and trade union policy agendas, and some of the more radical type of policies that Labour has worked on in the last few years have at their heart been Co-op Party ideas. And so we want to try and educate that as well, but also to use them as a useful tool to recruit more members into the Co-op Party and to recruit more cooperators. And that's where you as Co-op Party members can help us to grow that and to be that louder voice for for a movement that's made up of 7,000 different cooperative social businesses that are coming up with different ways of developing an economy that works for people rather than profit, and tries to give people a say in the stake. And those are kind of core, as I said to Labour's agenda, but also it's about then trying to recruit those members in to help us to further strengthen that joint policy platform. So just to quickly touch through a few of the things that we'll suggest that you can do. I suppose the starting place is, if you have joined any of the calls over the last 4 or 5 weeks, you will have had some ideas and some suggestions and things you can do. I think the key thing is, if you are a CLP delegate, then there are obviously stuff you are officially down on the agenda and everything as a Co-op Party delegate. But if you're not the delegate, or your CLP doesn't have delegates, please don't let that hold you back. If there are ideas or campaigns or issues that you care about, and you've seen the Co-op Party is doing quite a lot of work and that you haven't heard discussed at your CLP, then please do bring it up. And so one of the first part of that is around our campaigns, and perhaps using some of the motions that you probably see other organisations do within those CLPs. We're proud to have a track record of some big campaigns on some of the important social justice issues that we all face. And a key role that you can play in trying to make sure that those campaigns get a higher profile is to get your CLP engaged and to engage other members of the Labour Party in your local area. So, for example, one of the things you'll have heard us talk about is our campaign on modern day slavery. You know, an issue that goes right across the whole country and is present in every community, even if we don't fully see it every day that we walk by. We have 100 councils have now signed up to adopt our charter on modern day slavery, which is aimed to use the buying power of local councils to stamp out modern day slavery in their areas, and to make a stand for a different way of procuring. Most of those 100 councils, though, and quite a few of them, the first step in getting those councils on board was a motion to your CLP. And now different people will have different views on the enjoyment of spending a Thursday evening in a CLP meeting discussing motions, but sometimes they can be quite important and are quite useful tools of educating members on a wide variety of options. And so, you know, to take that modern day slavery option, that was ordinary members of the Co-op Party and the Labour Party putting forward those motions to their CLP, discussing the issue, and as a result calling on Labour councillors to work to get their council signed up. It doesn't matter if the Labour council is in opposition or in power, the same basis of that campaign works. And, you know, obviously it's a lot easier when Labour's in power, but also we have examples of where those CLP motions have helped trigger Labour councillors to work with you know, other groups in the council to get those charters adopted. So it's incredibly important. And, you know, as I said, kind of sometimes people can turn off when we start talking about motions, but they can be quite powerful tools in building a wide alliance around some of our campaigns. There's also a similar approach you can take on some of the stuff that we've done around food justice. Again, it's another one that cuts across both of our movements. The last Labour manifesto had quite a strong commitment to this, and that was on the back of the campaign that we did throughout all of last year and at Labour Party conference last year. And so, you know, there's a set of resources on our website that you can use, and that helps you to, whether it is, again, to go down that motions route, whether it is to organise local events and activities with Labour Party branches, to have a chat about what our you know, food justice is something that goes right across the entire country again, and is present. It's a really relevant one in each of our communities. But also, you can use the larger group of people that might be at a CLP meeting to have a discussion about what is your local council doing to respond to it. Lots of Labour councils and lots of Labour and cooperative groups are doing incredible stuff across the movement, and so there's an opportunity to hear what's been happening locally. It's also an opportunity for you to share some of the stuff that if you take a look at our resource pack, it gives you some of the ideas that you can talk about at those meetings, so that you can share, you know, with councillors and with other groups about the kind of things they can be doing. And also you'll be able to find out about local groups that are already doing this. And so that's a really useful way to build out Labour and cooperative campaigns, and rather than being just kind of in the back room of a community centre, to be properly linked into the communities that we serve, working with kind of causes and projects and community groups that are trying to tackle issues of food justice and the lack of access to good quality, affordable food in large parts of the country. So again, it's a really useful way to engage people on a very important topic, but also to build those community organising type links. And I suppose the third campaign that we talk about, again, sort of builds on that, which is around Love It Listed, and you'll probably have heard that mentioned a couple of times as well. If you haven't, that's our campaign to protect community spaces and assets. It works differently in each of the nations of the UK, depending on the devolved legislation, but the basic principle is the same, is that there are a variety of community spaces, be they pubs to bus stops to parks to community centres, which are at risk of closure because of cuts or of sell-offs and the likes of that. And there are different ways that communities can come together to protect those. In England, for example, it's around that listing process where you work with your people in your local neighbourhood to gather the required number of signatures, and that initiates a process to have that asset or space listed, which means is a greater say for the community should that asset be, should there be attempts to sell off that asset in future. It means there's more of a longer period of time for the community to either come together and try to come up with an alternative business plan or try to raise the funds to buy it itself. And again, that's using that Love Listed campaign resource pack. If you take a look on the website, you'll see that there's some examples of the kind of campaigns that have worked quite successfully and across different parts. But also you'll see some of the ideas of how to use that as a campaigning tool. So again, thinking about not only about how, so there's two stages, I suppose, in a way, how do we get more Labour Party members thinking about the Co-op Party and our policies and agenda, but also then how do we go beyond those to think about people who may be potential voters, people who have not voted Labour and Co-operative before, but might do if we were talking on these kind of issues that they care about. It's also quite useful campaign tool for new candidates, perhaps who don't have a profile locally or are raising a profile locally ahead of upcoming local elections. You can use that process of gathering the signatures as a way to introduce yourself to your constituents in your ward, and to try and build up a bit of a backing around some of that. On the topic of candidates, then we'll move on to the second section, which is around there's a really important way to if you are a CLP delegate, or if you're a representative on the local government committee, or even just attending any of these meetings, is to try and burst some of the myths about being Labour and Co-operative. A lot of people, and particularly if you have officers who've been in post for quite a long time, they'll tell you that it's really hard to become a Labour and Co-operative candidate, or it's not really possible. Unfortunately, none of that is true. It's so simple to be a Labour and Co-operative candidate at the local government level. The first thing is to get selected by your ward as the Labour candidate, and once you've been selected by your ward, your local Co-op party will then endorse you, and normally that's a pretty straightforward process. Normally if you've been through the Labour Party selection process, our step is just quite simple, just to make sure that everything is in order, and that's all it takes. But we need kind of people like you going to those meetings to kind of encourage. You might find current councillors or candidates who are Co-op party members that aren't Labour and Co-operative. And so you could be a really powerful tool for us in terms of encouraging them to stand. If you hear officers say in meetings, that Labour and Co-operative is just too much hassle or too much work, it's normally because they don't really understand it, and so therefore again you can be that powerful advocate to say, well, actually it's really straightforward. It's a really powerful way to demonstrate kind of the commitment of that candidate to both their movements. And also it can be used particularly in parts of the country where Labour has struggled. It's also another opportunity where the Labour brand sometimes has a bit of negativity towards it. Adding that cooperative bit on at the end is a different angle that you can have on the doorstep, in terms of bringing up different types of issues, or coming back to core Labour ideas but through a different door. People often will have a more familiar or perhaps a better kind of relationship with the Co-op brand because of the Co-op's stores in their neighbourhood and that kind of stuff. So you can be a really important tool in terms of growing those candidates. And also if you're thinking about standing yourself as well, then we've got a whole variety of resources around that. So if you visit party.coop/local, if you're planning to stand in England next May, then the process is open already. If you're planning to stand in 2022 in Scotland, Wales, or London, or the other parts of England, then you can have a look at that information, and also they'll be more up to date as those selection processes get underway. The next part then, once you've been selected as a candidate, is around manifestos. And again, this is an incredibly powerful way that you as an individual Co-op party member can do a lot to build a movement around you. Pretty much every local council election will have a local version of the manifesto, and that will be decided by local priority. Sometimes it'll be developed at the local government committee, but sometimes your branch will also impact on it. Every year we publish a short guide. It's normally got 10 or 12 bullet points on things that you can make sure to get into those manifestos, and they're really strong ways to build a strong local Co-op movement. So it can be things like ensuring that if the Labour and Co-op councillors are elected, that they'll put in place support for cooperatives and social enterprises and different forms of businesses that put people before profit. And so that's a clear commitment you can put in the manifesto. There's other things around, picking up perhaps some of the campaigns. So there can be a manifesto pledge to adopt our work on modern day slavery, or to sign up to tackling food justice. And there's also some stuff around community wealth building and how you can use Co-op values and principles to set up to build a stronger local economy by investing in local businesses and local services and local people. But at the heart of it, not necessarily just co-ops, but at the heart of it uses Co-op values and principles. So again, if you check out the website, you'll see last year's version of that. And again, what is a matter of it going along to your local meetings, they're talking about manifestos, bringing that along with you and suggesting some of those ideas. And the very last one for me before we open up to questions is some simple ones around, if you haven't heard anybody talk about the Co-op Party or co-ops at your CLP or any other local groups you're involved, really, ask if you can bring a speaker. So either that can be from one of us to head office and party staff, whether that's the General Secretary or our local government officer or our campaigns officer, depending on something specific that you want to talk about. We can also arrange for one of our elected representatives, so whether that's one of the 26 Labour and Co-operative MPs, whether that's some of our group at Holyrood or the Senate, our Metro Mayors, our Police and Crime Commissioners, our London Assembly members, to our councillors. All of those people are there. So if you think that there is somebody that has an interesting angle, get in touch with us and we can make sure that we can get you someone to come along. But also, as well as kind of having somebody from outside your area come and talk, another really strong way to do it is to educate Labour Party members on actually what co-ops are available in their local community. They'll probably know the co-op shop in the high street, and they may know that there is a funeral home, but that's probably for a lot of people the limit of it. And so therefore, bringing in co-ops that are local to you is a good, useful way to show people what's available locally, to educate them on what the co-op movement actually is, that it isn't just this thing on the high street, a corner shop on the high street, that is much more deeper than that, and also show them causes that they can get involved and support. So that could be things like housing co-ops, which are probably more of a way of around educating people that kind of some of those negative perceptions about housing co-ops aren't really true. Or it can be other co-ops like credit unions, which which members can get involved and trade with, and help build a stronger local financial credit cooperative in their area. Again, this is will be different depending on what your local circumstances are, but normally it's just as simple as asking your secretary or the chair if you can arrange a short speaker, whether that's part of the core agenda or whether it's before or after it. Potentially you could tie it into some tea or coffee or something stronger after the CLP meeting, and arrange for a speaker to come along. And the Co-op Party locally can provide a little bit of funding for that as well, if that's something that holds it back. And as well as educating people around that, with all of these, the really useful thing is to take along one of our sign-up sheets. And what that means is that anybody who is interested in what you've been talking about, or the topics that have been discussed, they can just quickly put down their details, and if you send that back to us, we can follow up to them with a quick email with just some information, and also generally about the party, but also if there are things they're interested in doing, like things like standing for election, if they want to do some campaigns, or they want to engage with the co-ops in their area. And that's, again, the kind of thing that we can do, and those resources are all available to download on our website. So I think that is everything from me as a quick whistle-stop tour through a bit of the basics around our relationship and that sister party relationship, and how we're slightly different to any of the other groups that you might have heard or might be a member of. A bit of a discussion about kind of some of that, those abbreviations central. This is your CLPs, your local government committees, and those kind of bodies, through to what you as an individual member can do at each of those. As I said, if you have any specific questions, or if there are any issues locally, they do pop up from time to time, do get in touch. The email address is membership@party.coop. If there are any questions, or general questions, or any ideas that you want to share, feel free to pop them into the chat now, and I can pick up some of them. Yeah, so we'll see if there are any to come through. Just bear with me a second. So I think probably the only one that isn't a general one is probably just a was sort of a kind of a quick summary of the kind of things that we can that you can do at CLP. So I suppose to very quick summary then, in terms of what we've those kind of approaches you can take. So the very start takes very little effort on your behalf, is to ask to invite a speaker. And I said that can either be somebody from the Co-op Party, or it can be someone from the local co-op movement. Importantly, remember to pass around those sign-up sheets at that discussion, so that you can take away kind of people's email addresses and stay in touch with them afterwards. The second step would be around campaigns, and so thinking about some of our campaigns and whether you want to pass motions, and whether those motions are calling on your local councillors to do something, or whether it's, kind of those motions are just showing support for a co-op idea, and you're using the debate as an opportunity to educate members. So that'd be the second way of doing things. And again, with each of those, as with a speaker, if you're doing a motion, it's a really good idea to bring again around those sign-up sheets so you get people's information to take forward afterwards. The third one is then around candidates, and if you know people who are putting themselves forward, especially if they're only thinking now about standing in 2022, if they're not yet a Co-op party member, get them to join, and they'll have enough membership by the time it comes. If there is somebody who already is a long-standing member and has never stood, maybe just have a kind of gentle conversation, see if it's something that they've considered. And the fourth and the last one is around your manifestos. Have a look at our short guides. It says 10 or 12 bullet points. They're very quick things that can be copied and pasted into a manifesto, but they are about sending that quite a strong message within that manifesto that's joint labour and cooperative. And also each of those things are only 1 or 2 sentences, but actually they're really concrete things that labour and cooperative councillors can do when they get elected. So that, I think, is was that kind of quick walkthrough of the kind of 4 kind of main ways that you can get involved. I think probably the other question, so just two questions, and we'll just pick up and then we'll wrap it up for today. The first question was around CLP structures and in terms of putting forward motions. It will depend on what type of structure. It depends on what way your standing orders really are, and it's far too early on a Wednesday to start talking about standing orders. But it depends on what way your meeting will be structured. So if it doesn't have delegates, then sometimes it will be the branches. So you as an individual put your motion to the Labour Party branch that you're part of, and if it gets accepted by that branch, it then goes to the all-member meeting. In other parts of the country, it can be just a set number of members can then get it on the agenda for the all-member meeting. So that sort of depends. And if you want to have a discussion about that, feel free to come back to us, and we can talk that through in terms of the specifics. And the final question, just to pick up here. Two final questions. In terms of a question from Anthony in terms of working in large areas, the London Assembly is the London Assembly is obviously up for election next year, and this will be the first time that all the constituency candidates are standing as Labour and Cooperative. And obviously the campaign has been suspended slightly because it was suspended because of the COVID crisis, and the elections will take place next year. So we had some plans around building out that campaign to build that profile locally, taking advantage of the fact that each of those constituency candidates were Labour and Cooperative. So on that one, I think we will come back to you and to members in London in very shortly to try and pick that up again, and to make sure that we have a have a strong profile in the run up to next May. And there was a question around local active in terms of if you're not too sure if there are active members in your area. That's I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, and yeah, sometimes you may not have an active Co-op party branch in your area, or your branch might be quite a rural area, and so it covers such a large geographic area. If you're interested in doing something on a more local level, perhaps organising within a CLP, then the best thing to do is get in touch with us, because we can then put you in touch with the other members. So there might be there might be another 5 or 6 members within your CLP, but you might not know who they are. So in that case, you wouldn't be a formal Co-op party branch, but obviously we shouldn't let structures stop people coming together to do some work. And so on that question, we would say come back to us. And then there's just a question from David about the parliamentary process. We haven't touched on that today, because as far as the parliamentary panel isn't open, so we can take that up offline. The process for parliamentary selection between Labour and Cooperative is very different. Everything I've talked about today has been about local councils and local government at all tiers, and then about the Scottish and Welsh parliaments. And the systems that they use is very different to what happens with the parliamentary elections. Normally the panel opens is tied to how far out we are from a general election. The basic principle is the same. All our MPs have been selected by the Labour Party, and they go through that whole process. But as part of the process, they'll have been nominated by the Co-operative Party, and that's where this is different. Whereas with local government, the Labour Party selects candidates, and then those candidates come to us and ask for our endorsement, and then we make them Labour and Co-operative, and that's how it works. And everybody, those candidates are members of both parties and supported. For parliamentary selections, for Westminster parliamentary selections, it's quite different because we nominate someone. So a Co-op party member comes through, they get put onto a parliamentary panel, and when selections open, they then go to get nominated. They have to be nominated by their local Co-op party members. So it's a very important different step, and it's a lot more complicated process that needs NEC approval and stuff like that. So what we'll do is we can see if we can get you the answer to that, David, offline. For anybody who is interested though on the general point of standing to be a parliamentary candidate, once the panel is open, all members will receive an email about that, and there'll also be some candidate development around that, especially encouraging people who perhaps may not have considered going to be a Labour and Co-op candidate in the past, in terms of making sure that our parliamentary group is as representative of the wider community as possible. So do keep an eye out for that. But also, if you are thinking about putting yourself forward for parliamentary selection, it's a good place to start is probably to take a look to join our council candidate development program, which launched last week. Even if you're not thinking about standing in the specific, in next May's election or any upcoming elections, but you want to have a bit of an idea of what's involved and how you can find out more and what kind of training and support is available from us, and how we can open some of the doors for you, then do check that out. It's called the Co-op the Candidate Development Program. You should have an email from us last week, but it's also will be on the homepage at the front of the website, or if you go to party.coop/local, that will take you through to there. So hopefully that's a quick whistle stop through some of these issues. As I said, hopefully everything that you've seen over the last 5 or 6 weeks through these sessions has given you some ideas of different ways that you can get involved, whether it's through the stuff we talked about today, by taking co-op ideas to the Labour Party, which, if you don't have time to get involved in coming to a co-op party branch meeting, another way you can do things is what we talked about today, is that if you're already going to Labour Party meetings, why not be that person who stands up and promotes the Co-op Party's ideas and agenda? As I said, we've talked a bit about as well about support campaigns, which you can take and build. And things like Love It Listed aren't restricted to you working with the Labour Party. You can work with a whole variety of local groups and causes to try and make sure that those things are achieved. And we've also then talked about some of the stuff about how you yourself can become a candidate, so whether at all the tiers of local government, and again you can find out more, as I said, in terms of joining that candidate development program. The first session I think is actually taking place this evening, so if you want after this, the best thing to do is go take a look at the website and sign up to that, and you'll be able to take part. As this is the last one, I'm going to say thank you very much for those of you who've joined us throughout the month of August. If you have any feedback or suggestions, then please do get in touch. The email address again is membership@party.coop. All these will be uploaded to our website, and they'll remain there for a little bit. So if you've missed any or anything, if my Irish accent and speed of talking has been too slow and you need to go back and slow me down, then feel free to go and check that out as well. This is, I suppose, is just to start an introduction. So hopefully this has given you a bit of a thought, a bit of a flavour of the kind of things that you can do as a member. But to be honest, what you decide to do next is entirely up to you. There isn't a set plan as a Co-op Party member that you can do to get active. That where you live will probably be one of the biggest shapers. Depending on which of the 4 nations you live in, the kind of political situation will be very different. But the key thing is to perhaps just think about, if you have time to get involved, then do drop us a quick email. We hopefully will be starting our branch meetings online again from September, so there'll be opportunities for you to meet more local members through the autumn and into the winter, leading up to our online conference in October. So hopefully a whole lot of opportunities there to try and find out a bit more. And finally, you should hopefully receive in the next couple of days, the next week or so, the latest issue of our member magazine. And again, I'll give you a quick recap of some of the things that we've been doing over the last 6 months. The last 6 months haven't been our usual way of working, but we've worked hard to try and make sure that we've put our values to the fore during quite a challenging time. So you'll see that magazine, which will give you a bit of a recap of the last 6 months, but also importantly talks a bit about what's coming up in the next 6 months and how you can get involved to shape some of that. So again, thank you very much, and we'll leave it there for today. And if you have any more questions, feel free to drop us an email. And also on the website has a whole host of resources. So whatever it is that you've heard over the last few weeks that you're interested in finding out more, please do get in touch. Yeah, bye for now.